Good afternoon, councillors. Welcome to the extraordinary council meeting of Thursday the 9th of May. I have one apology from Deputy Mayor Neil Brown. Would someone like to move and second? Councillor Ellis has moved. Councillor Brahm has seconded. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Extraordinary business. I know of none. Is there any extraordinary business? No? Conflict of interest declarations. There being none, moving into item number 4. The long-term plan 2018 to 2028 amendment for the Ashburton Library and Civic Centre. So on page number 1 of your agenda, councillors, you have a report that I'm sure you have all read. To the staff, are there any comments you wish to add at this stage? Tony.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, everybody. I just thought I would take the opportunity just to take you through the thought process of how we got to the recommendation, because certainly this is a landmark decision for Council, and as officers we certainly gave it that gravitas when we were coming to the recommendation as well. After the debate and the discussion that happened last week during the deliberations, it became really evident that the weight of the public submissions really favoured a facility that would serve the community needs well into the future. So with this in mind, when we were determining how we came up with the recommended option to you of a $51.6 million building, there were a few considerations that were made. With regard to the library, it essentially seemed improvident to recommend anything smaller than the 2,450 square metre library that we have recommended, given that the community did give you a clear indication to do this once, to do it right, and to build for future generations. But obviously, as you'll see on page 10 of the report, this does come in at a price increase of $3.6 million from the preferred option price of $45 million, which the $45 million would have given you a notably smaller library. You will also see in the report that we have steered away from taking a pick and mix type approach to the features of the larger library space. This is because that we feel the most important decision today is to agree on the space itself. What is contained in the space, in the officer's view, is still quite secondary at this point in time, given that this is a concept plan. In saying that, Trevor from Athfields is actually on his way down. He should be here in the next 5 to 10 minutes, and he'll be able to answer any specific questions you may have. But his team also put together the appended pages just to show you visually what some of the features were intended to be, which was possibly lost during the consultation process. We hope that this has helped to clarify some of the views, and we also hope that it has been helpful for you today. We took the view with the cafe space that modern libraries commonly have cafes close to or within them. The space of the cafe is modest and will essentially only allow for an espresso bar or a grab-and-go type cafe. Therefore, we do not consider that it will detract from local businesses. As officers, we believe that to exclude the space for the cafe at this stage would not create the modern social hub that Council is seeking and would possibly be a regretted decision in the future. As officers, we did agree with the sentiment around the table last week with regard to the IL4 and how this potentially wasn't needed for the entire building. And so our recommendation has been based on the IL4 for the EOC only. And probably the biggest elephant in the room is to do with the environmentally sustainable design features, or the ESD features. And we consider that these could be the aspect of the budget that could be the key area of debate. We took the view of allowing the full $3 million into the recommendation because actually as a council you are in still quite a difficult position, given the project is still at the concept design phase, to actually be able to determine what features should be in or out at this point in time. We consider that by allowing for the full amount, that at least all options can still be well considered at the detailed design phase by a thorough cost-benefit analysis, and then you could make the final decision which features will be in the final build. As always, more than happy to take questions. I could talk for hours otherwise.
Thank you very much for the update, Tony. Councillors, do you have questions of staff? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tony, thank you for what you put together after our rumblings last week. Um, yeah, I think most of us felt quite well after last week. There were some real good submissions and there were good debates about it. Um, yeah, I was a wee bit amazed to see the full library in this one. Of course, we had a bit of a discussion of making it slightly smaller, but I certainly am more than happy than what you've got here. The 3 million you put in, yes, that is something we can decide later on when we know and what we can do and what is the best option to go forward with that part. So I'm more than happy the way it is standing. Thank you for that.
So sorry, councillor, was there a question?
Didn't you think so?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brown.
Councillors, are there any further? Oh, Councillor Reveley.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. We are only at concept plan stage, so I'm sure the team which progresses this will be very well aware that they shouldn't ask for any more money. So I think 45,000 was a large amount of money, so while we're at the concept stage, let's treat it that. So I'm not sure who wants to answer this one. Can we be sort of assured that 51.6 million is fully fitted, ready to walk in, and you'll be able to work the project without too much having to come back to the council to fit it? You'll be able to do the job at that price, everything finished.
It's through Madam Mayor, the care that we've taken to establish this number with the expert advice from project managers, quantity surveyors, architects, gives us a high degree of confidence that we can build the facility that we're proposing for the number that we are recommending.
Supplementary to that, Mr Chief Executive, did we seek assurance from our project manager about on budget, on time, and could you remind us what the response was?
Yes, the project manager and the quantity surveyor are very proud of the fact that they have brought in any number of their last projects. I think the last 5 projects the quantity surveyor referred to as being under budget and on time. And I think one of the things council should be satisfied with is the layers of expert advice that they've put around the process to date, and there should be a degree of comfort that the number that is being put before you has been carefully calculated such that you could expect to build this building for that number.
Councillor Reveley.
And in amongst this, all the preparatory work that's going on for the next 12 months till you start getting the tenders, that's all covered in this amount as well. Is that correct, Mr. Chief?
Yes, it is. So this includes the demolition of the county building and the church hall, and it includes fit out and moving in and all the things that you would expect to be in a total cost of a facility of this nature.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, and I'd like to commend Tony for the great report as well, and the addition of photographs in there, actually perfect. Thank you very much. My question is around those 2 commercial tenanted spaces, one being the cafe and the other being ECAN. I may have asked this before, but I don't recall the answer. What kind of agreement do we currently have with ECAN around that?
We haven't, I'll put it another way. ECAN have indicated their strong desire to continue to discuss the terms of a lease for the staff in Ashburton. So we took comfort from that through the submission process. That commitment was very strong, and in fact just yesterday when councillors met with ECAN, you heard the chairman of ECAN congratulating council on getting the project to this stage and how much he was looking forward to ECAN staff being able to collaborate and work together because of the shared use of this facility. In terms of the cafe, or what we perhaps now want to call an espresso bar, that's less advanced, so our intention to lease that space remains, but we have not engaged the market to see how they would respond to that at this point.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, and in the absence of Athfields, this might be a little tricky question, but first question, they have seen this recommendation and know everything that's in this report. So did you get any feedback from them on, like, the laminated timber in the design? You know, did they say, oh, that's going to throw a spanner in the works, or there wasn't any great concern from them with that being part of the recommendation?
So thank you, through the chair, to the first part of the question. Yes, so we've formed this in working with Sean and Trevor and the team. The second part of the question with regard to the laminated timber, you'll see on page 6, the timber building design does come in at a cost premium of $1.3 million. And so the project manager has provided comments there. Essentially, when they realised that was part of the consideration after last week's deliberations, it's actually quite an exciting opportunity. Laminated or timber inclusion in a building is very good from a carbon footprint perspective. So it would potentially change how they had been approaching this. I do need to point out with you that there will be a requirement for an element of redesign if council decides to include that, because as timber, with regard to it being a structural solution, it does have limitations with regard to column and grid spacings. I don't know too much more than that, but when Trevor arrives, I'm sure he'll better give you more detail. But that price is inclusive of that 1.3 million.
If I could just expand on Tony's comment, my understanding of that comment in relation to the build limitations is there's about 3 suppliers in New Zealand. I think they're all based in Nelson or in that region. And the solutions are kind of bespoke solutions, so you start to have less choice around the design if we go that way. And one of the reasons that we wanted to acknowledge the interest in timber was to provide for it in the total capital costs that were brought before you, but acknowledging that there needed to be perhaps a specific decision on that and other ESD features along the more detailed design, so that there can be a conscious decision to include or not. My understanding is that timber does come with a small, perhaps up to 5% premium on construction costs, and therefore that needs to be weighed up against the advantages of the carbon footprint as we understand it, increased performance in seismic events, so it's an advantage there. But then also some restrictions on how you might design the inside of the building because of the structural elements of the timber.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. My question is, why have you gone to the 51.5 when the general consensus was, I felt, 48? And remember, 54% were not in favour of the large building. As I say, we will debate it later, but I felt the general consensus was to be somewhere in the middle between the two size libraries.
Can I just answer that, and then perhaps Tony can fill in? What we tried to do at the last meeting was reflect on the general debate and the tenor of the conversation and the discussion, taking into account submissions and then the debate around the council table. And we, like you, heard that there seemed to be a consensus developing around somewhere between options 1 and 2. So in trying to frame a report, we were very mindful of having a sensible reason to recommend a particular place in that report. We felt, for the purposes of your debate and decision making, that we should build the number from the sort of features that were in front of us and that the community had considered and that you had debated, e.g. the timber, rather than perhaps more arbitrarily picking a number and then saying, well, now what can we get for this? So we felt if we concentrated on the serviceability of the building and the features that it contained, that would logically lead to a price, and then you would be able to consider that price as being reasonable or not, but that it was built up in a fashion that allowed you to consider the service elements of the building rather than just being satisfied with a number and then assuming we could build what you wanted for that number. So that's why we did it, but deliberately acknowledging that that is a recommendation for debate, but that's why we did that.
Councillor Rawlinson, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done, Tony. I was indisposed last week, but you've landed in a place I'm very happy about. But my question just is around the total costing. Does that include all the IT movement and relocation?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. I thought it would, and I hoped it did.
Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Reveley.
Yeah, just a clarification that the 10% allowance and the 5% escalation, that's in the 51.5 as well?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yes.
So round this table, like other projects, we won't be talking of finances again. It won't go past 51.6 million.
We're doing our level best to hold all the suppliers and contractors to the budget that we have for this building.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my question is to our Chief Executive. You've mentioned that the amount that we're talking about, 51.6 million, includes the demolition of the building and so as the church hall. What about Paul May's building? Is that also included in there?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Councillors, so we've been provided a very good report. We've already had some discussions around the submissions, and we've heard from the public. Are there any further questions? Councillor Lovett.
I was just going to ask on eliminating, just give me that figure again, if we took that component out.
I could refer you to page 6 of the report.
Yeah,
So the
just
timber, using the timber added 1.3 million.
1.3, okay.
Councillors, I'm wondering if you would comfortably take the recommendation that is on page number 1 in 4 parts.
That's what I was going to ask. So,
Okay, so Councillor Ellis.
so if councillors are happy with that, I would like to move the first part of that recommendation, 4.2, number 1, that council receives this report and resolves to fund and construct a new Ashburton Library and Civic Centre presented as option 3 hybrid in this report.
Councillor Brahm.
I second that, Madam Mayor.
Excellent. So, councillors, the matter is now open for debate. Councillor Urquhart.
Yeah, I guess the debate side I see is option 3 hybrid the right wording. People won't get it mixed up as the option 3 we originally put forward. Maybe 2A or something like that.
Okay, so to the mover and seconder, are you happy to change the wording perhaps to a combination of option 1 and 2 hybrid? Is that what you're referring to, Councillor Urquhart?
To be honest, Madam Mayor, my first reading, I said option 3. I didn't understand it either. I was going to be option 1 hybrid.
So to our committee secretary, would you like to just explain exactly what we're voting for so we're crystal clear?
You may not need to refer to a particular option, so you may want the resolution to read that council receives this report and resolves to fund and construct a new Ashburton Library and Civic Centre presented as a hybrid option in this report.
And I'm happy with that as the mover, Madam Chair.
So now that we have the wording clarified, Councillor Price, you are speaking.
Well, I just wanted to make the point that the option 3 that we're referring to is none of the options that went out for consultation. It's talking about option 3 in the report.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification, Councillor Price. You're right, option 3 as written in this report, not referring to option 3 in the consultation document. So we know what we're voting on. The wording matters not because we all know what we're voting on. We'll just make sure it's crystal clear in the minutes. Is that correct? Okay. So we've had speakers for. Any speakers against? Then I will put the recommendation. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Next, option 2. Councillor Ellis.
Once again, Madam Mayor, more than happy to move 4.22, and then that is broken down to A, B, C and D, and I'm not sure if people want to talk those individually as well, because I'm guessing there'll be some bits that might be easy and some not so easy.
So, Councillor Ellis, realising that people are watching online, and just for clarification, would you mind reading?
So what I'm asking is, do councillors want to take number 2 in 4 parts as well? As in, we'll do A first, then B, then C, then D, because I can see us otherwise jumping all over the place.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes.
So I will move 4.2.2, option A, increasing the library floor area from 950 metres squared to 2,450 metres squared.
I'll go to Councillor Braham, who was the original mover, and we've since changed this. Councillor Braham, are you happy to second that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I will second that.
Okay. So now we're open for debate. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't think we need to go to this extreme. When we say that that's what the public wanted, as I said before, 54% did not want the ultimate size. It's all very well to say it's international standards and so on, so on. We're a community of 33,000, and it's all very well to say we're built to the future. We've got to be realistic. And I felt that the architect and our consultant came up with 45 million, which was perfectly adequate, that they thought for our community and the facilities that we provide. The 53 was thrown in to say, look, we're a prudent council. We've come out at 45, and 53 is really pretty expensive and pretty bells and whistles type thing. People, the general public got the wrong impression, I felt, that they felt 45 was a cut price one, whereas 45 was really adequate for our district. I felt with our workshop last week that we reached a compromise, about 2,200 square metres, which is a compromise. It's still bigger than what we originally thought, but it's not the super duper one. We can't compete with Christchurch. We haven't got a hope of competing with Christchurch in places like that. So I'm much more in favour of going in the middle, somewhere 22, 22.50.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I think we should stick to the 2,450 square metres. And I think it's shown us in some of the pictures provided about the tiered seating that we probably all had a different idea on, that shows that that's going to be used as extra space and sort of multi-purpose space within the library. And I think the majority of the people who made submissions said, do it right. They wanted to see something done really well, and this is our big chance to do that, and I'm happy with the 2,450 square metre up.
Councillor Lovett.
I would support going halfway between whether it was around the 22 and it still gave us our tiered seating, but not a 75 seater one, but more around that 50-60. Because I think, you know, we've got to look at the finance and what this district's going on in the moment, and it will put pressure on rates. And the majority did kind of, yeah, they want to do it right, but yeah, no, I support the 22, around that 22.
Councillor Reveley.
I believe that we take 2 right out completely. My feelings are very close to Councillor Wilson's. We've got a very good project group out there. If we start dictating timber, size of this, size of that, I think we're starting to dictate something which is of an unknown nature that for this group to work with. They're left with a very free hand. They know the total budget, and they'll work towards it. If we say that this has got to happen and that's got to happen, we may be putting pressure on something for them to get the best outcome. Councillor Wilson's right. We had an exceptionally good building at 45 million. We, personally, felt that was a very good option. I thought it would come back and that people would want less. The 53 million was thrown out there to throw something into it, but I would happy to move an amendment against having two in altogether, but let's debate it.
And we are debating right now. Just a question of clarification, please, Mr Chief Executive. Comment was just made by Councillor Reveley that we shouldn't be determining the size. While we're determining the budget today, we also need to give enough clear instruction to the project manager and the organisations, do we not?
Well, indeed. In fact, it's the other way around. It's the size that dictates the budget. So we have to settle on a size because in very large part it's the square metre building rate that dictates the budget for the building. So they're utterly related and interlinked.
Thank you.
Always disturbed me that he's right.
Councillor Brown, as the seconder of the motion, we normally have you speak when you second the motion. Are you wishing to reserve your right? I'll allow it this time, but just to remind.
Basically, just a question to Councillor Wilson. I can't work out his 50% of people who are against it. I can't work that out. Could he please explain? Because I get to 78 who are in favour.
46% voted in favour, therefore 54 must have been with the other option. Surely you can, that's 46 from 100 is 54.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. Just a two-part question, please, if I may. This is more than double the size of our existing library, am I correct? Of the floor space that's used now?
Sorry, the people at home can't hear you when you don't use your microphone.
Sorry, the existing library is 1,500 square metres.
And that's the downstairs floor space?
No,
I thought
that's
included.
the entire building.
Correct, thank you, I thought that. No, and my second part was, I sit between the 22 and the 2,400, but our present librarian, how does she feel about having virtually double the floor space in her operational space?
She's immensely excited that the council is at this moment considering building a modern library for the future of Ashburton.
Thank you.
And we welcome Trevor. I imagine the traffic was appalling from Christchurch. But we'll just get you to use the microphone, please.
Nice to be here.
So welcome, thank you for being here. Councillors, before we actually conclude discussions and voting on this motion, are there any questions of Trevor in regards to the size? Councillor Price.
I don't have a question for Trevor, no.
Yes.
In your sketches, I suppose, that went out with the consultation document, we showed a bigger footprint, obviously, for that to go to the 2450. Does that, for you, have any greater impact on the visual appearance of the building, having that bigger footprint going right out to the edge of the footpath and those sorts of things?
Yes, so when we did do those diagrams, they were done pretty quickly, just to give a gauge of how that would impact, and I guess that's the one thing that we have been thinking through for the last week, and sort of heads up where it's heading. So we've just been working through ways where we may do that. So obviously that we showed it going right to the edge, so kind of feels like it's a bit close. And the question for us is actually where can we actually put that extra area, and we'll be certainly looking at a number of options around it. But that first diagram was done pretty quickly, and I don't think it's the ideal solution to go all the way.
Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to move an amendment that the floor area be 2250.
Councillor Wilson, I was actually calling for questions, and procedurally Councillor Price was next. May I take his?
I thought we were in debate.
I was calling for questions. Yeah. Councillor Price, you're waiting patiently.
Thank you. And no, it's not a question. I'd like to speak in favour of going to the 2,450 square metre library for a number of reasons. First of all, I'd like to draw your attention to page 8, where we talk about options and risks considered, where the officer has pointed out that the deficit in terms of the smaller size against the standards will only grow. We know the population is going to grow in this district. 1950 is already beneath the international standards. We have, despite what Councillor Wilson may add up, from my reckoning, we have 46% of people who wanted the full $53 million build. We have another 4% who wanted a hybrid, so there's at least 50%. And then we had many comments in the submissions that this community wanted us to be visionary. They wanted us to do it once and do it right. And I would just like you to think back to those councillors who were in this position just over 50 years ago when they decided that a 1,500 square metre library was appropriate for this community when the population was probably no more than half of what it is now. So they had that vision. I would like us to do the same. And then finally, we are funding this intergenerationally. We need to think of the future. There are people who are not born yet who will be paying for this building. And I think for the benefit of our young people coming through, we need a international sized library, because why would we shortchange them?
Councillor Wilson.
I'd like to move an amendment that the floor area of this building be 2,200 and the library floor area be 2,250 square metres.
Councillor Wilson has put a motion. Oh, sorry, an amendment. Thank you very much. Councillor Lovett.
I would second this, and, because of affordability to the district at the moment.
Okay, so councillors, are we clear on what the amendment is, or would you like it read? Councillor Wilson, could you read the amendment in its entirety, please? And with the microphone.
I'll move an amendment for 2A that reads, increasing the library floor area from 2,250 square metres. It'll be from 1950 to 2,250.
So, councillors, you are clear on the amendment. Are there any speakers for or against? Councillor
Am I able
McMillan.
to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Could anyone tell me how much the savings would be for a 200 square metre library, or smaller 200 square metre library, please?
So, through the chair, the cost of building a 300 square metre increased library would come in at 2.16 million. So that's, we need to go 3.6 minus 2.16, which I'll do now. So in that decision, you would save, that would be smarter, 1.44 million. Thank you.
Excellent. So we've had one question. Are there any further questions? So looking for speakers for or against. Councillor Rawlinson.
Could I ask Trevor what effect that would have on the library space?
It's hard to know exactly, because we haven't gone to that level of detail, but I guess it comes back to that. I mean, obviously it's that future proofing as well, that it's potentially difficult to add another couple hundred square metres later, even if it's like 10, 15 years. So how we carve up that extra 500 square metres, we still haven't worked through the detail. Something we'll sort of work through with the library team as we get into it. So it could be across, you could spread that across, or it could be more performance space or activity space, or a whole lot or after things. But I think basically it would provide that future proofing would be the biggest gain without having to come back in 15, 20 years and tack a little bit more on, which might be quite difficult.
Chief Executive Riak.
My recollection, Trevor, of that additional space was that between option 1 and option 2, that did include the tiered seating performance area. It did include additional space for collections, and it included larger meeting rooms. It included a kitchenette. and it included additional breakout areas. So while you've got a space that would be smaller and you could then pick and choose, from the 1900 to the 2400, that contemplated those additional features. So if you come back, then something in there is going to be foregone. Is that right, Trevor? Is that how you recall it?
Thank you.
Yeah, so when we did, you're right, when we did those options, it was in Sue's original brief, it did have all those additional functions around events and performance and meeting spaces. So we did pull it back because effectively the event centre was there, but also we had other functions within it. But that's why we did actually put that forward as a potential for doing that. But again, I think that's something that can get tested a bit more. So there's areas there we probably need to delve into the details exactly how do you want to do it. But everything you say is possible, but you could choose to add other functions or increase space as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Madam Mayor, I'm against this amendment. To save 200 square metres and end up with a library what is not international standard, to me is just taking a shortcut. We've been talking about shortcuts, what happened over the years here. Let's not start again. So I'm in favour of the full to 450 square metres.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, and I think there's a bit of confusion because we're talking library space, but some of the space we're talking about I think is going to be shared space as well. You know, the library exclusively doesn't need some of these meeting rooms, and if there is some tiered seating, I don't believe it'll be exclusively for the library to use. I think we're talking shared spaces for the benefit of the district, and it will actually make some of our meetings that we hold a lot easier too if they're down on that ground floor area where there's some more space. So even though we're calling it library space, I don't believe some of this extra area we're talking about is exclusively library area. I think it'll be for the benefit of the building as a whole.
Councillor Urquhart.
Yeah, I too agree with what Councillor Ellis is saying, but Trevor hit on it just before, saying to extend the library at a later date if it's not big enough could be very expensive. So I would support the 2,450 square metre option right from now.
Surprise.
Thank you. My concern throughout this process has been that we learn lessons from our past builds. And if we think about EA networks, we have already got plans in the long-term plan to extend that building. Do we really want to go there with this particular building? Let's do it once, do it right, as the community has urged us to do.
Councillor Lovett, you were the seconder of the amendment, and as I said earlier, yes, thank you. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. I don't support bringing it down to 2,250 square metres. If I've got my maths right, it only makes a $4 difference on our rates impact by leaving it at $2,450. So from the 45 million option, if that makes sense, bringing it down to the 2,250 will, yeah, the difference is only $4 per household. So.
Councillors, has already been stated previously in this meeting, this is one of the biggest issues you will face this term. So I encourage those who have not yet spoken to have your say. Councillor Bell?
I don't agree with the amendment. I would go for the 450, because I agree with what Councillor Russell was saying, that this is not just for the library, this is going to be used by the community as well. It's a shared space. And I also agree with what Councillor Price was saying, that this is an intergenerational loan as well. So people who haven't been born yet will be paying for this. It's not just the ratepayers now. So I don't agree with the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Malcolm?
I actually agree with the amendment. I believe we haven't fully investigated the other meeting areas that we have in this town. When we talk about tiered tiered seating spaces. We have MSA. We haven't done any negotiation with the church next door yet, regards to any collaboration with our meeting spaces. So, yeah, that's where I see it.
Okay, councillors, so we've debated the amendment. I will not be supporting the amendment for many of the reasons that have already been stated, that we have been asked by the community to be visionary, that we have asked to get it right first time, and therefore I will be voting against the amendment. Councillor Wilson, you do have the right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the perception in a lot of people's minds is the library's the library and we're suddenly going to cut the size of the books, you know, the library space down. But as our Chief Executive said, it includes enlarged meeting rooms, it includes tiered seating, it includes a cafe or a catering area that people can use with the meeting rooms after hours. It's got a whole lot of extra stuff. And as far as Councillor McMillan goes, she obviously doesn't think of rural people. Rural people pay 70-something% of the general rate. So the rural people are going to pay for the majority of this building. So, I mean, you've got to be mindful of where the cost falls. It's all very well to say, let's build the super duper. If you live in town where I do, it's great fun because the rural people are going to fund it in majority. That's one of the reasons that I've got we should, and to say we're going to have to extend it in the future, that's pie in the sky stuff. We're going to be building a really good, lot bigger building. The present ground floor in the library is 1,100 and we're going to have 2,250 on my amendment, which is double the floor area available for the library and the meeting rooms. So to be prudent for the people who are funding it, I think 2,250 is more than adequate.
Sorry, Councillor Wilson, just before I put the amendment, you made mention of the fact that much of the burden for paying for this will be going to the rural ratepayer. Could you remind me why it's going to the rural ratepayer?
You well know, Madam Mayor, it's on the general rate. The general rate is funded by 75% of the rural rate.
Absolutely, and supplementary, why is it going to the general rate?
Point of order, Madam Chair. Once the right of reply's been had, isn't that the end of the debate and discussion?
I was asking questions, was I not? So, Councillor Wilson, I did ask a question. I'm just seeking
As the Mayor, I thought you should know the answer to that.
I do know the answer, and I'm sure Mr Brake will correct me if I'm wrong. The reason we are going to the general rate is our UAGC is at capacity. Is that right, Mr Brake?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I need to look it up, but not all of it's a general rate, some of it's a UAGC. The balance of, because the UAGC is up at its 30% cap, is going to the general rate, but not the whole cost.
Thank you for that clarification. So we are clear on what the amendment is. I will put the amendment. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. So I declare the amendment lost. So we're back to the original motion, which was moved by Councillor Ellis, seconded by Councillor Brown, that increasing the library floor area from 1,950 square metres to 2,450 square metres. Is there any further debate or has it been had during the amendment? Then Councillor Ellis, do you have any right? Okay. So I will put that motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare that carried. We are now at 2B. Yes, please.
So,
okay.
Yeah, 4.2.2B. Confirming that the Emergency Operations Centre will be built to IL4 standard, which is 150 square metres, with the remainder of the building built to IL3 standard.
I think Councillor Brown was next.
That's correct, and I will be second that motion.
Okay, councillors, any debate? Then we'll put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye, against, carried. Councillors? Councillor Brown? Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
See,
We're up to 2C.
Carry on. So, 4.2, 2C, providing a dedicated fiscal envelope of 3 million for the provision of additional environmentally sustainable design features in the building, subject to council approval of the cost-benefit analysis of these features.
Okay, councillor Bell.
I would like to second that motion.
Okay, the matter is now open for debate. I would just like to state that I will be supporting that motion. I think it's very exciting that we can take the lead on showcasing what is possible in regards to environmental sustainability. Timely that we are talking about this now when we had our climate change submissions part A today. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Who is going to decide what is where the business case stands up? Because we've heard contrary opinions on, like, of there's a photoelectric or whatever they call them panels. Consumer said they don't stack up, whereas who is going to do the decision on these things?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it would be our intention to bring those before full council, given the interest in the matter and the money involved.
Councillor Price.
I'd like to speak in favour of this. It was one of the original project objectives, one of the key project objectives to meet, where feasible, a five Green Star standard. If the cost-benefit analysis stacks up, and we've got that proviso in this recommendation, then it makes no sense not to go forward with it. If it doesn't stack up, we don't put it in. It's as simple as that.
Are there any further speakers? Then I will put the motion as recorded under 2C. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Councillor Reveley.
Yes, could I just ask a question, probably the Chief Executive? The Pioneer Hall wasn't up for grabs, but with the decision that it's remains in the bill, does that need mentioned in this document?
No, and the reason is that we heard a submission from an individual on Pioneer Hall, and it was really helpful and encouraging and a little bit exciting. But in the end, whatever we do with Pioneer Hall is subject to a resource consent, and so we believe that the provision from a budgeting point of view should remain the same as per the options that we had consulted the community on.
Councillor Brown.
Madam Mayor, if we can go any further, I'd like to do the next recommendation, 4.2.d, as it is standing, including laminated timber in the design, subject to cost-benefit analysis.
Thank you. Councillor Rawlinson.
Thank you. I'm very happy to support that. One of my first comments in our early discussions was around the use of timber in this building, so very happy to support it.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I support this, but I'd like somehow added into this that that there's no disadvantage to the design of the building through using laminated timber, because all we've got here is if it stacks up cost-benefit wise, we go ahead with it, but it may have some design implications that might restrict us by using timber. But now that we have the expert here, we can get his advice on that.
Yes, so similar to that extra 500 square metres in the building, this is another one we've sort of been thinking through what the implications are, and we did actually meet with the structural engineer yesterday for a couple of hours just to kind of understand what the implications are and giving us a bit of a heads up. And so between us, over the last sort of 10 years, we've done a number of different timber buildings, and I guess initially it could mean with closer columns and more walls. But there are some more innovative ways of using timber as well, as opposed to just having a lot of walls and sort of more open plan areas. And so we've sort of talking through at high level of different opportunities on using that more innovative way of using timber, which is a bit more exciting than just using it as a flat panel. So walls get smaller. They can have rocking walls and self-righting buildings. So this is technology that's been around for the last sort of 10 years. It's been used in Christchurch in a number of buildings as well. So it's likely that you will have like deeper beams, more walls in the building. The grids are actually have been set up as being at an okay spacing already within our current design. And we believe that even with timber we can maintain a clear span on the main office floor, which we're quite keen on as well. So we do, there will certainly be an impact with more walls, but as far as the feeling of the building, the openness, and what we're looking at achieving around that, that's something we believe we can achieve. I think 2 years ago, worked with Becca Structural again with an addition to the library at Lincoln University, and again they're keen to use timber, and so that was going to be like a decanting building, so it had to be for workspace, for teaching, and then it was going to turn into a library building as well. So it had to be quite open plan and open, so we managed to work through a system with some walls, but they still maintained an openness as well. So there's a fair bit of work to get to that position, but we're pretty comfortable that I guess the essence of the building as far as openness, both in the library and in the main workspace, will be maintained with timber, but potentially looking at the slightly more innovative sort of systems in doing that.
Councillor Malcolm.
Yes, I've been a forester, and yet I've been owned a concrete business as well. So, but anyhow, I'm really for the use of laminated timber. And one of our submitters, Mr. Cameron, submitted on the use of this, and he was at the forefront of spray irrigation in this district. And I thought, what a great thing for him to submit on. Right, it was really good. So that's all.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. On page 6, it says it's a social decision rather than lower building operation energy costs. When you mean energy, do you mean to heat the building or to build the building? And the second part of the question is, if we're going to use laminated timber, what are we replacing? Steel or concrete as far as spans go?
Currently it's been designed as a steel structure, and you'll see in some of the images it's got diagonal cross bracing in areas, so you can still move through them, but there are a number of areas, and obviously concrete foundations and concrete floors. So that's what we've got at the present time. So instead of the sort of diagonal cross bracing we get with the timber option, you could have walls. It still could be a hybrid option as well, so the walls and columns and beams could be timber, and you could still have steel for cross bracing or bracing the building. So that's where it talks about the potential for hybrid solutions. So if you're wanting to maintain large spans on the upper floor without really deep timber beams, then again you could use steel for doing the longer spans. So we'll be looking and investigating all those options to get what is the most cost-effective way of doing it, and also with not impacting on the design. The other option is, instead of having concrete floors, there is the potential for using timber floors as well. You just have to work through a bit more carefully around the fire rating and also acoustic rating on the floors, but there are timber floor systems as well, and that keeps the whole weight of the whole structure down, which is advantageous when you're using timber structures and laminated structures. So so it could actually be a whole building above the ground floor slab without any sort of concrete on the upper floors if the structural loads work in. So there's obviously a bit of work to go through a number of different options when you're combination steel, timber, rocking frames, open timber portals or walls, columns. So that's this discussion we kind of started at high level with engineers, and there are some interesting and potentially exciting possibilities with that.
Supplementary, I'd be horrified to lose our open space look purely to go to socially say we're being environmentally, but you're using woods. A new building like this with the space we're going to build, to me it's got to be open as much as possible, even if it has to use steel.
you know, we agree, and we'd hate to lose that as well. So, like Devonport Library, the main, if you know the main space at Devonport Library, they've got the laminated timber beams and columns and fins. So again, that's a library space, which is actually quite an open space. But I think one of the core aspects of the building is that maintaining that openness on both floors.
Councillor Price.
Thank you. I would like to speak in favour of this as well. It does state here that it is a social decision, but I would claim it's not a social decision. Well, it is a social decision, but it's also an environmental decision. And with the 4 well-beings coming back into the Local Government Act, I think it would be absolutely appropriate to go down that route. Timber has greater insulation value, so I think there will be energy savings there as well, so there's financial benefits. And this morning we heard from submitters on the climate change policy who urged us to show a lead, and this would be doing exactly that, showing a lead as a council to what can be done to reduce our carbon footprint. And finally, I'll just draw your attention to the second paragraph on page 7, where it talks about the greater earthquake resilience, and that is one of the key reasons for using timber as far as I'm concerned.
Councillors, are there any speakers for or against? Then you have the recommendation there at 2D. I'm in favour. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. We are now looking at 3. Councillor Brown.
You're correct, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation 4.2.3 that the project budget is set at a total of 51.6 million, including the dedicated fiscal envelope for ESD of 3 million and 10% contingency fund and 5% allowance for escalations.
Councillor Malcolm.
Second that.
Okay, are there any councillors who wish to speak for or against the recommendation? There being no speakers, Councillor Braham, you do not need your right of reply. I will put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And now 4.24, Councillor Braham.
While I'm doing it, I might as well do that one as well, Madam Mayor. 4.2.4, that Council amends the long-term plan 2018-28 to give the effect to the points 1, 2, 3 of the recommendations.
Councillor Rawlinson.
And I'd like to second that.
Any speakers for or against? Then I'm in support. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you very much for taking the time, Trevor, to come down today. We appreciate your effort. Thank you to staff for the work that you have done. And it's an exciting time for this district to have clarity in how we are going forward. Thank you.